to Jayne at thejaynecarrollshow.com.
Welcome back, everybody. Boy, do I have an interesting guest for you on the line. Kevin Miller. He's the author of Heart of Steel. Now, I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest, a shortened version of his story. He was a man that discovered in his adulthood that the story of his family life was complete fiction from what he knew as the truth. And he dug into his family secrets and he found out horrible things: brutal abuse, raging alcoholism, miscarriages, incredible struggles, and even a family murder. Matter of fact, his grandfather had changed his name as a result of this. So most of us probably don't have this an extreme of the story, but I think most of us know way too little about our families and our dark secrets. And he's going to tell us how we get to learn about them, why it's important that we do, and how we do it without tearing each other apart. Let's welcome Kevin Miller to the Jayne Carroll Show. Hi, sir.
Hi, how are you doing, Jayne? Been listening in. Great show, by the way.
Thank you. What? This is amazing. This is something. This whole. How old were you when you basically found out that your family story was fiction?
Well, you know what, Jayne? I was actually a grown man, and my father as well. He didn't know either, and we found out that my last name really isn't Miller. It's actually a very Polish name, Puchalski, and none of us knew this. It came as a huge shock to us. But we found my uncle was at a funeral, and some cousins came up and handed him some newspaper articles, and the newspaper articles just chronicled a murder, as you said, a big scandalous murder back in 1920 that happened, and it just kind of shook us to the core. And then my father, a few years later, received some documents and a letter from his cousin Francis that had a whole bunch more information on that. And it's something a book he wanted to write, but he just didn't feel he could write that. So he asked me to write the story, and I was more than glad to do that. And as I started digging in here and stuff, I just started uncovering just some unbelievable, secrets, dark, deep secrets, some of them in our family history.
I would guess, Kevin, that all families have those. Maybe not, as I said, in some cases as extreme, but I think we would all be very surprised if we knew the things that you discovered, went into depth with our family members. Why is it important that we do? Is it maybe not better to sort of go off and not know and live in denial and create your own life and not have that impact? Or is it freeing to know about your background so that you can break from it?
I tend to lean towards the latter, Jayne. I think it's more freeing. I think it's important. Even though the truth and stuff are painful and shocking and all of that, you're learning about yourself and where you came from. You're learning about your family and learning things that even though they're painful and they might be scandalous, there's lessons, that we can take from that, And I gotta say, kids, man, I have two teenage daughters and they've got their friends and stuff, and they ask me about my book all the time and stuff, and I tell them, and they're fascinated, by family history, and they all want to know. They're all like, I want to do that too. I want to learn where I'm from, because it's a fascination with your heritage, and you're learning who you are, and you can pass these valuable lessons, down the generations, kind of like the Native Americans did. They told stories, and those stories passed down each generation so that they weren't lost. So I think it's important. I would say it's important. Now go in, understanding that you might find some stuff that you didn't want to know, or it's going to shock you, so you kind of got to go in and make that decision before you do this.
Yeah, I think so too. And the fact that you found out some of the worst of it, that became your father's mission to find out all of it. Maybe helped. I mean, if you find out you're going in there just to, tell your family story, And
Right.
a lot of Mormons do that. They do
Yeah.
they try to put together the genealogy. Matter of fact, most of the stuff that they use for Ancestors.com and that kind of thing are
Right.
from the Mormon work. But but to always fill in the dots. Now, one of the things that I think is interesting is how you got family members to open up to you to tell their story, because that that can't have been easy.
It wasn't easy, Gene, and I'll tell you, my grandfather and his four siblings swore an oath of silence, over this whole tragedy that happened back in 1920. It was in a rural farm in Ohio. And on his deathbed, my uncle, asked him, it's like, Pops, tell me about your life, and he just raised a finger and said, don't ever ask me about my life. And he took all that to the grave with him, all those secrets. And for years, we had no idea, until this turned up. And then we started digging deeper and to find out exactly what happened. And I was so moved by his story. I was very close to my grandfather. I love him dearly, but, there's obviously a lot about him that I didn't know that I'm so glad I know now, because he was just a remarkable man at 12 years old to face, this tragedy and to just, push on and overcome just impossible odds.
Yeah, I think that one of the things in reading your work, and you
Hmm.
are a veteran, and you're somebody that
Hmm.
served. I often thought of the Greatest Generation and how
Yes.
they didn't tell their stories. They kept everything in, and
Right.
and so maybe this is a new way of things, because that didn't serve them well emotionally. They were
Hmm.
it was all locked in, and
Right.
it, I think we do need to get it out, because it can be toxic for us. Even if
Right.
we don't know, not knowing can be toxic as well, because you don't
Yeah.
understand things.
I totally agree with that, and I think it's there. Like I said, there's so much to learn. You can learn so much about your grandparents or your parents, and we should have those conversations, and also as parents, we should be talking to, and grandparents, we should be talking to our grandchildren and our children and passing these things down to them, because it's important. And it was stunning to me, because in 1920, my great grandfather was shot in the head in his sleep while he slept. He was a rich farmer, a good old boy, actually quite a character, very, very cruel. He drank a lot of whiskey. He was kind of the good old boy of the town there. But my great grandmother was bound and gagged, and she sent my grandfather at 12 years old to go get the sheriff. And this is the stories, the newspaper stories that we chronicled and saw. But the story takes some bizarre twists and turns that we did not expect, and and a scandal kind of breaks out with this story. And my grandfather and siblings find themselves alone in an orphanage in 1920 in Warren, Ohio, and it was a not a good place to be. So they go from this situation to the next situation, and then he decides to run away from this orphanage with the idea to go find work, save enough money, come back and steal his siblings out of that orphanage and take care of them. And I'm just amazed by his courage. And it's like, 12 years old. Are you kidding me?
Wow, that is amazing, and yeah, the
Yeah.
admiration you must feel in that story, because you're a child, and
Right.
you do the right thing, and to go through that horror of and
Right.
survive, and you know why people don't want to talk about it, but I think by how you tell your story in Heart of Steel, um,
Hmm.
it really does open up people. And I think if you can talk to your family members, you want to tell the
Hmm.
story, our story, not to blame, but to understand. And
Right.
I really felt a sense of freedom when you talk about it. That
Yeah.
these people, and you sounds like you were very you were very gentle with them, but not but very honest too. And I think that the
Right.
combination, it can be very powerful and freeing for the people that want to participate in your project, because most people don't know anything about their families.
Right. No, there's so much there, and I just encourage people to look into it. There's so it's so interesting and so fascinating, and you just I embrace my Polish heritage now. I went to 23andMe and did the DNA, and I used those, Ancestry and 23andMe to help do some of the research as well. And I've just learned so much, and it's just so much more enriching. When I think of my grandfather and how much I loved him, I just love him and admire him that much more, knowing that he did all this and took this to the grave with him and never told any of us what
And
he went through.
you were able to put it down for other people in future generations. No,
Sure.
you don't know, and it's
Right.
fascinating. I know a lot of people that are uh, divorced. There's much more divorced than there used
Yeah.
to be, and how many times as adults these children want to ask the other parent, usually the non-custodial, the parent, the father, tell me about your family. They don't know anything
Right.
because they weren't
Yes.
around them. They weren't, and they're surprised about all that, and they feel
Hmm.
more complete once they start to understand where the people they came from and
Yeah.
what a gift you've given to your family. Even though it seems like a dark and
Yeah.
a horrific tale, it's important they know it and know the good that came out of it. And your grandfather's story is an amazingly good story.
Oh, thank you, Jane. Yeah, it really is. I mean, it really is a gratifying feeling to be able to pass this story down. Knowing that my great grandchildren, are going to read this and know the story and know what happened. It was a good, and the story is. I mean, I get a lot of people who contact me who've read the book, and they say they were inspired. I mean, even though the story has some dark spots in it and stuff, they're like, I'm inspired by this story, and it's like I laughed and I cried and I felt the emotion of it. So they really lived it through my grandfather's eyes, and felt his pain
Well,
and felt his
you're a
joy,
gifted
felt his.
writer, which helps.
Yeah, yeah. So, and later on, I mean, the last part of the book, he meets my Irish grandma, and it's a love story at the end there, and it's his love story. They were married for 49 years, and he met her in Canton, Ohio, which, by the way, is the Hall of Fame sister. You're talking about the NFL and stuff earlier there, and actually this murder takes place about 3.5 weeks after the NFL was formed in Canton.
Wow. So
Yeah, just a.
everything all comes
Mm-hmm.
back together. Yeah, it's interesting to hear that. So what's next for you in terms of you've obviously you've told a story. You have a
Yeah.
gift to communicate and write. You're going to do this more. You're going to teach more people how to do it for themselves because this is a gift that
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people could benefit from.
Yeah, absolutely, Jane. Yeah, I'm more than willing to help people who want to kind of do this, themselves too, and they can certainly reach out to me. My website for this is called heartofsteelbook.com. I've got social media up there. I've got my email, and this book is now going to become a movie. I'm actually working with a friend who's
Oh,
owns a
really?
production
That's
company.
exciting.
Oh,
I
I
love
know, and
that.
I had lunch with him. I had breakfast with him one morning, Jane. I said, okay, Kevin. His name is Kevin too. I said, hey, here's my book. Read it. Nothing obligate. Just read it. And he did. And he goes, yeah. He says, when I read your book, I just thinking, I'm just going to read my book for a friend. But then he called me up and says, we got to meet. He goes, I got to option this book from you. He goes, we got to turn this in and make this thing a movie because it's that good of a story. It's a story that's made for film. So, needless to say, I was thrilled to hear him say that. And I have two young actors, daughters who are also actors. I'm from Arizona, but we're living in California right now, in Southern California, because I have two teenage daughters who act. And writing this book, I'm picturing in my head, well, I've got the two perfect roles for my two daughters to play, and I just think it would be so fascinating to have my grandfather's great granddaughters, playing roles in his story.
Wow, that would be quite a story.
Yeah,
Yeah, in itself. No, it keeps on going. Before I lose you here, let's say I'm listening to you right now and I'm thinking
sure.
I would like to do this, but I don't know where to begin. What
Right.
are the first couple of steps you take?
I'll tell you, this is kind of what I did, and I think this is what somebody who's thinking about doing this should do. First off, relatives have so much information, so much more information than you realize. Find all your living relatives that might, have some knowledge of your background. of family history and such. And you can go on 23andMe and do your DNA, and you're going to get matched up with thousands of relatives. So you're going to find a lot of relatives you didn't know you had that you can reach out to, and just ask them questions. Just say, I'm doing some research on the family, and start there. Obviously, Ancestry is great too for getting your family tree and finding those resources. But I also spent a lot of time at the library. I went back to Warren, Ohio, and went to the library, the genealogy section, and they were so helpful there. So and I found a lot of other newspaper articles and other information. And then I went to the Trumbull County records, to look for the property. We didn't know where the farm was in 1920, and I was able to find the deed to that farm.
Wow.
And then I then I went and visited the Historical Society in Warren, and I met a lady in there named Cindy, and she was so fascinated by the story that she says, we normally charge $18 an hour to do this. She goes, I'm going to do this for free just because I'm just so, intrigued by the story. And she sent me a plat map from, the late 1800s, and it matched up perfectly with the deed. So I was able to find the farm. So I would say utilize those records. Go to the libraries. Go to the public records and look stuff up. Go find old court records. Death certificates, birth certificates. Round all that stuff up. Talk to your relatives and look for, and see what you can find out. In that regard. Because there's just so much out there to help you with that.
And even if it doesn't become a book, I mean, this is something that can be valuable for your family in general. And even if you're not the greatest writer, maybe you have a nephew that can write, or a cousin he can write, or something that can help you in this process. Did you make any people in your family mad in the process?
That's a good question, Jane, and I get asked that sometimes. And I got to honestly say, no. I was surprised by that because I was kind of worried a little bit, because I've got a lot of relatives and some people I haven't met. And my grandfather obviously had siblings who had children, who had grandchildren. So I was kind of hoping, I was kind of a little nervous about that. But I started getting phone calls and emails and people reaching out to me who were related to me, and it was overwhelmingly positive. And they thanked me. They're like, "Thank you so much for writing the story, about our family, and it was a great book." And so I was relieved and very happy at the same time, because it was like my whole family, even family I hadn't met, until that point, embraced the story and embraced the book. So it was awesome.
It was meant to be. How has it changed you in doing this? How are you different than you were before you wrote this?
I'll tell you, it gives me a much deeper appreciation of family, Jane. I mean, and the importance of, talking to each other, communicating with your kids, I still have my dad. My dad's 86 years old. And like I said, he asked me to write this story, and he was such a good resource for me. He knew bits and pieces enough that we could, put all this together. But it's changed me in a way that I have a deeper appreciation of my grandfather, of my family, and the struggles that they went through. It's just like, wow, man. The young people today don't really understand, I don't think, how much struggle, the older generations go through. That generation was made of steel, literally.
Really, absolutely, and that story is profound. Did it make you a better father and a husband?
I think so. I mean, if I had to say, I would say I think so, because it's made me more, more sensitive and more open. And my wife and I mean, we're a little bit older. We have, like I said, we have a lot of children who are grown up and a lot of grandchildren, but we've got two young daughters, kind of our second round here. One's 13, one's 17, and I tell them all the time, it's like, you guys got to understand, you don't have regular parents. You got grandparents for parents, and they kind of laugh at us and stuff. But our relationship is very open with them. They're very open, and they can pretty much tell us anything. And I think this experience, because they embrace the book too, and they're like, "Dad, I'm so proud of you, and I'm going to read your book too." So I autographed a copy of the book and gave it to each one of them, and they've been reading the book. And now I tell them, you guys better read the book now, because if you're going to play these parts when the movie comes out, you're going to need to know them real well.
Absolutely. So it's very so would you say that your relationship with this generation of children is more open and honest than it was with the children you had earlier in life?
I would say, yeah. I mean, we have good relationships with all our children, but the generational things are different. And maybe it's just because we're older, Jane, and we're just wore out. Maybe we're just a lot more patient now. I
Yeah,
mean,
that can happen too.
it's kind
Yeah.
of like this. It's
No,
kind of like I know now what I didn't know then.
right, right. And you bring that wisdom in that thing.
Yeah,
We learn from our
sure.
mistakes as well. But I think
Right.
this is a wonderful story. I think it's a story that we can all relate to. But I think what made you do it and what you gained personally from having done it is a story that we can all learn from. Even if we doesn't end up being hopefully a very bestseller and a hit movie someday, it's something worth doing. I think knowing our family history is can help free us to be better people and understand why we are who we are. And that's it. That's a great
Sure.
gift you've given us this Christmas, sir. I appreciate it
Mm.
very, very much.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Again, our guest is Kevin Miller. He's the author of Heart of Steel. Where can people get it?
People can get it. If the easiest way is to go to the website, heartofsteelbook.com. There's links to Amazon there, and there's links to Barnes and Noble. It's on there as well. Amazon has an ebook and a paperback available, and it hit #1 bestseller last month, so I was thrilled by that. And Barnes and Noble just has the paper book available. So heartofsteelbook.com is where you'd probably want to go.
Yeah, and get it, folks. And you can, like I say, you can get it online. You can give it, you can read it over the Christmas week. It's really something. And were you always a gifted writer?
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you say that again? I missed that.
Were you always a gifted writer? I mean, were you somebody that always had
You know what? Honestly, Jane, I mean, my main profession has always been a web developer, and I've been a technical writer for years. So this was something new for me. This is my,
boy, that's really not
it took me
technical.
3 years to write this book.
Yeah,
It took me
no,
3 years to write this
your
book.
heart's in it. It really is you're very you communicate. You make people want to be more like you. So it's a great
Oh,
thing. Merry Christmas, sir, and I'm going to be getting some of
yes.
those books from some of my family members, so I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you so much, Jane. Merry Christmas to you. And hey, go Ducks, man. Beat those Wisconsin Badgers in the Rose Bowl and represent the Pac-12. So
I hope you're
I'll
right.
be
That's it.
watching.
That I like it. Go Ducks. Thank you, sir. Yeah,
Yes, thank you,
it's a
Jane.
very good night. Very good read. Very good read. And I really, yeah, if you're not a writer or you have somebody in your family, but the idea of sitting down with your family and, and finding the story, because we don't do that. I can recall a few years ago when my mother passed away. I am the first. My parents were married at 18. They had me when I was 19. They were 19, young, very young. So I was the first grandchild of the next generation of both sides of my mother and father's family. My sister was the second. And then all our other cousins from other siblings, etc., my mother's and father's sisters and brothers, came after us. And so we were the oldest. My grandparents died very young. Three of them died in their 50s, and one in her early 60s, my maternal grandmother. And it was my cousins were at this funeral with my mom, for my mom and stuff. And I had family pictures out there, and they're going, "Is that our grandfather?" No, your grandfather's over there. They never knew him. They never knew their grandparents. And they started asking me all these questions about them because they didn't know them. And quite candidly, I didn't have a long time with them, but I have vivid memories of them. Some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are very funny. Um, my maternal grandmother was not, a fairy tale grandmother. My paternal grandmother was. She was, she's the one that brought you in the kitchen and helped you make cookies and did the whole thing. But their stories, and they always, whenever I see them, they want to hear stories about their family. And we keep talking about doing it more, but we don't do it. This book sort of has inspired me that maybe it's time we start doing this before it's too late. It's too late. And you do this. Y'all, every time you see your family, we got to get together. We got to do this. We got to do that. And you don't do it. You see them next year at the Christmas party, the family Christmas party, or the Thanksgiving dinner, or whatever, and then you don't see them for another year. And then it's too late. And so Mr. Miller, he just went and did it. Now his story was pretty compelling, but it's interesting.